So I think as we're trickling in, I'm just going to start. Some of you can see me, some of you are still walking out and about. That's great. Fantastic having you here. And I want to say good morning, New York, good afternoon, the other side of the Atlantic. And I'm super happy to see you all, and thank you also for turning on your cameras. This is amazing. This is something that I was going to ask you first so that we can see you and see who's participating. Thank you so much for signing up for the science storytelling workshop that we're offering today. This is part of a new series at the DBE High in New York. We're offering a few things about contemporary knowledge sharing, and we were very excited that you have an interest in this and kind of show us that this is the way we should go, and this is something that you really appreciated. I'm Catherine. I'm the program manager here in New York, and I'm with the team Julia, if you want to wave really quickly in the camera, and then also Jared, from whom you will hear in a second. So I don't want to say a lot. I just want to make a point that in when we announced and thought about the event for today, we always think or tend to think that science and storytelling are two words that are not quite working well together. But I was trained in cultural studies, and I was always very surprised by this differentiation. For me, it's like this is an artificial separation, because if you really think about it, most of the discoveries we've made have actually their roots in stories, right? Or an experience or a question. So, but then somehow over the course of the last, I'd say 200 years, when actually the natural sciences sort of established themselves more as its own discipline, the storytelling and the serious science, as we like to call it, specifically in Germany, did not seem to be super compatible anymore. So, and I tend to, and I think the team as well, we really tend to think differently. And this is where I'm so happy that Jared is on the team here in New York. He's a writer and incidentally also the communications officer at the DB High here in New York, where he comes into play, and as he has been the main driver behind this new initiative. And so I want to hand it over actually to you, Jared, and ask you to tell us a little bit about the story behind the science storytelling story and why it's something that we really take seriously in our work.
Thanks, Kat. Hello, everyone. It's me, Jared, who's been emailing you this week. So happy to really meet you here today. So glad to see so many faces. I came up with this idea of the Science Story Exchange and this particular workshop equipping people with science storytelling skills at the end of 2020. It was kind of a reaction to all of the digital events that I attended, like many of you in 2020, that were sometimes a little repetitive, a little tiring. We hosted a lot of events in 2020, and these were a lot of panel discussions. We had German and American experts talking about amazing topics like AI or alternative energy or mobility. But I, as a viewer, struggled to connect sometimes to the content. I felt like I walked away and there wasn't anything really sticky or impactful that I could, or honestly, that I wanted to carry with me away from those events. So I thought, what can we do that will help viewers kind of be invited in to work, research, and interesting topics? So the idea that I had was, let's have a character. Let's have these scientists tell a story and give viewers an access point. That's kind of the gist of this, so that they can relate to and understand why someone is speaking and what it has to do with them. Of course, whenever you give this idea to scientists, there can sometimes be a little bit of pushback, people saying, it's not what I do. I work with data and facts, not emotions. So I applaud you all for just your interest and openness. That's all we needed. That's just the baseline. And what we want to do today is just give you some new tools and provide a perspective on how stories can be used and why they should be. So this is a free workshop that we're super happy to host. Shout out to German taxpayers. Many of you are on the call today for helping us cover this one. I think it's going to be really great. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Solène Wolff, who's going to be our facilitator, and she can introduce herself and charm you with her lovely accent.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you, Katrin. And thanks to the whole DVIHA team. I'm extremely grateful to be with you today and to have the chance to give this workshop on science storytelling. Because indeed, in the age of information, it's essential nowadays to cut through the noise of marketing, but also advertisement and misinformation that we perceive from brands, from interest groups, but also simply sometimes from citizens who relay wrong information. And in the past, journalists were a reliable middleman who could pass, translate the insights on science and innovation. But today the missions are pretty precarious, and that's why there is a need to empower you as scientists and innovators to communicate science, meaning to engage the public with scientific information. So that's what it's going to be all about today in these 2 hours. And quick heads up here, storytelling. We're talking about factual storytelling, not fictional, which is another branch of storytelling. And also I will be referring to science or innovation. You please do take it as a broad understanding. If you are working in engineering or mathematics or academics, research, entrepreneurship, this is all under the same umbrella that we wanted. So I will refer very often to science and innovation just by simplicity. So welcome again from me to each of you. Wonderful to see everyone here. I will tell you a little bit about me so that you know who you're going to be listening and talking to for the next 2 hours. So my name is Solène Wolff. I'm French. I live in Berlin for more than a decade. And for you to get to know me, I could, for instance, guide you through my CV and highlight my most significant academic and professional endeavors, or what I would prefer to do, I can tell you a small story about me. And you know how when you're young, like you get often from adults these traditional questions like, what do you want to do when you grow up? So I obviously got that one. And I had an evident answer from me that I carried out for many years. Mondays, I would be school teacher. Tuesdays, I would be policewoman. Wednesday, I will run a bar with peanut dispensers on the counter. Thursday, I will be a soap maker. And Friday, I will be a bicycle ice cream vendor. And each of these decisions were for me backed up either by experience, that little, for instance, store of soap making in Provence where I was spending all of my summer holidays when I was young, or by a passion. That ice cream bicycle, for instance, I drew it over and over again. I could not get, ahead of it. And I feel that today my week and my endeavors professionally and personally have the same mindset, which is multidisciplinary. And my traditional week could look something like, on Monday, I document a rewilding project between Poland and Germany. Tuesday, I have a fantastic science workshop on storytelling. Wednesday, I produce a podcast interview with a construction material designer based in Niger. Thursday, I teach mindfulness and Kundalini. And Friday, I manage operations and finances of my agency. So that multidisciplinary dimension is for me really my calling. It's also my passion and what feeds me. And the core of it is to try the best that I can to participate to planet regeneration in anything that I do. So for me today to share with you insights on science communication is part of it. Because soon enough it became very evident to me that no matter which action I would undertake to help nature to thrive, if I couldn't tell clearly the science that I was backing up to the public, why would anyone bother listening? So for me, storytelling it's an instrument of impact. It's a necessity. It's also an evidence. And that's why also what I'm going to share with you today is not a training. It's also no methodology. It's just me sharing tools and experiences, hoping that it can serve you. So now you know enough about me. So we're going to see if that works with my connection, because right now what I would like to do is to get to know a little bit about you. And what we're gonna do is I will ask you, of course we are a big group, but so I'm gonna ask you to tell so much better. Okay, great, thank you for the feedback. Okay, so I'm gonna ask you to tell 3 words. And I hope you got who I am by now, but otherwise, that's gonna be for eternity. The first one is you're gonna tell me your name. Second is you're gonna tell me where you stand on the spectrum between scientist, innovator, entrepreneur, academics, etc. Third one is one word about your mood today. Like, how do you feel today? Do you feel joyful? Do you feel tired? Do you feel nervous? Do you feel excited? And then you're gonna pass the word to someone who you don't know in the audience, obviously. And on that, I'm gonna actually ask each of you again to turn on your camera, because I think I figured out my technical issue. And we would really like to connect all together. Thank you so much, guys. This is the joy of online format. All right. So I'm putting again in the chat these three words, and we are a big group today. So if we are to the point, so it's three words, not three sentences. So if we are to the point, we can have a bunch of us. Of course, at some point, I'm gonna stop and ask you to do, for the ones who did not manage to talk, to do it through the chat, so that we get a chance to connect together despite this digital realm. So I will start, and then we can go ahead. So Solène Wolff, communicator, grateful. And I pass the word to Julia.
Julia, brainstormer, excited. I'm going to pass to somebody else. How about Christian Schiel? I'm passing the word to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Annika. We will have every one of you else who did not speak yet, please go ahead and post in the chat the three words about you, so that we can connect in this way. And 2 hours will go very quick. That's why I unfortunately have to take some executive decisions. So go ahead, write it in the chat. This is what is it here for. And while you do that, I would like to tell you again a little bit about the aim of the workshop. What I would really like is that by the end of it, you got insights on what science storytelling is. You also practice tools to communicate your story. And last but not least, you begin the work of drafting it. And so for that, there will be a couple of house rules. The first one is that really this session is for you guys. This is for no one else apart from you. So make the best of this time. I know this is tiring, this is online, sometimes the connection is choppy, but multitasking is the easiest thing we can do. But if you manage to concentrate, to focus, and to dedicate your time to that, you're gonna get everything that you want. So I'm gonna make a break shortly before an hour of our time together, so that if you need to run to the bathroom, get more water, more coffee, or reply to an urgent message, you can. And meanwhile, it would be wonderful that each of you can be connected. That means be active. We are a big group, so there will be dedicated moments to ask questions and comments. So there will be kind of like two moments. One that I named burning questions and comments. So this is when you really need to ask again something that you did not understand, or you want me to repeat again, or exemplify a little bit more. So these are intended to be rather short sessions, really to the point. And then we are gonna have longer moments of sharing rounds where I would, if you already have in mind something that you want to tell as a story or anything, this would be the great moment to exchange. And you must have gotten the workbook that I compiled for you and that Jared shared yesterday. If not, I know that Jared will kindly post it again into our little chat. And use it. Of course, during these 2 hours, we won't have time to really write in details. I made it with like fillable fields also in the margins and everywhere. So just be messy, play with that, take notes. And I compiled it in a way that perhaps before every single talk that you will be doing, you can use it. And I know we have some connection problems sometimes, but as much as you can turn on your camera, this is so wonderful to be able to connect. This is also why I did not use any slides, because I would rather see each of you rather than you guys looking at another screen. So that's it. Before we start, I would like us to do a little poll to understand how much do you practice science storytelling. So the DVIH team should be pulling it. It should show up somewhere. Yes, Julia just did it. And so I would ask you, it's 45 seconds to quickly reply to the statements that sparks like most sense to you. I practice storytelling every day consciously. I practice storytelling often and would like to improve my skills. I guess I practice storytelling here and there, but I don't have a precise way, or I'm not sure to know what storytelling is. So go ahead, few last seconds before we close it. And while we do that, I will just tell you a quick word around the structure of our workshop. So as you know by now, I'm French, so I thought what a better way than structuring that as a French dish, a French meal. So we're gonna have kind of like three parts. There will be the entrée, starter, and then the main dish, and then the dessert. And in terms of intensity, it's gonna be a little bit like that. The starter and the dessert will be, we're gonna review some foundations around mindset and preparation of your talk, while the main dish will really be about you proactively already try to write a story or try to play with some of the instruments I would share with you. So let's have a look. Wonderful. So I see the results. I don't know, can everyone see the results of the poll? Great. So yes, great to see a big diversity of everyone. I see 10 are sleeping because they did not reply yet, so that's also a good indicator. And yeah, great to see most of you around. I guess I practice storytelling here and there, but don't have a precise way. But also quite diverse. So I think we can really share and uplift each other by walking from where we are at and taking every insight that can serve us. So if you have, I won't be mentioning the pages that I refer to because it's going to be quite obvious inside the little booklets. So go ahead and feel free to use it. So starting by the starter, by the entrée, there is three type of questions that I always ask myself before any story that I need to prepare. Written on oral one. So I name it kind of like the triptych of the W, because it's kind of like always simple for me to remember the why, who, what. So when it comes to the why, it's always very, to me it has been always very useful to think, why should you communicate your science or your innovation, your research today? And you can have different reasons. The first one may be that your goal or your motivation is for others. It's like you want people to stand up for science, or you want to fight against the dangerous tide of misinformation, or you want to develop a regain of trust in science so that there is no loss of translation. You may also want to empower people to join the conversation, to understand science, to make them feel that they can participate and they can be actor of it. You can also want to share the beauty of the world, like as a researcher or a scientist, like you see the world through lenses that most of the people may not be able to see. But you may also do it for your job, like if, let's say, you are receiving public funding and you have to communicate.
Feel free to keep on writing and thinking about it. Of course,
you
this
may
is just
also
the
do it for
starting
your
point,
company,
so you
because
will
you work there, you
keep
are
on doing
either
after
doing business
this
development or any kind of activity that requires you
so
to
the second
share the
W for
message
me
of your
is the who.
company or your NGO
This
or
is something that in
institution.
the past I used not to be so careful
But
with,
it may
but this
also
is
be
actually
the reason
key
that
for
you do
me
it for
to like a
you,
great
because you want to
storytelling,
pop out of your
which
bubble,
is
you want to
trying
get
to
out of the
understand who's
lab or
going to
get
be
out
in
of
your
the
audience.
office and expose yourself,
So, for
elevate your
instance,
profile, increase your base, but also
if I would
challenge
ask you who in the group
And
knows
it may
about
also be a
rewilding,
nice
you
and
can
fun
raise your
and
hand
rewarding
if you know
way
about
for you
rewilding.
to talk about what you
A
have
couple
been
of
doing.
words, a couple of hands.
So for me, for instance,
Wonderful.
often it
All
combines
right.
different reasons.
So
Like over the
if I want to
past
give an
years, the
intro on
fighting
rewilding
against the
to
tide
you
of
guys, I now
misinformation
have kind of
has
like
been
a
a
rough audience
priority.
profile. But of
and
course,
at the
this
same
is the
time,
simplest, and often you don't have the
every
option to talk to your
opportunity,
audience.
and actually
So how do you do?
yeah, we did not
You can
get the
think
story
if
to
your
that
audience
story
is
yet,
quite
but
clear.
basically
For
the
instance, sometimes you get
asked me today
invited
to
to,
speak
let's
to you
say, a
guys
keynote
because
speech
last year
on
they
a
have been
very
putting
specific
together
conference, like
the
let's say the future of
Forum,
mobility,
which was
only for
around building
professionals,
biopolis,
or
like the future of the green
virology,
city,
only for
and they
medical
gave me a chance
staff.
to give
Then you
a
kind of
keynote
get a
speech over
sense.
there. So in
Or
that
it may be
instance,
because you
of
have
course, I was
a
also
client
doing
meeting
for
and you know
their
who's going to be your
program to fit
interlocutor.
it.
But
So
if not,
you can already go
then you
ahead
may
if
want
you
to
have
consider a few things.
already kind of a
The
precise
first one
events
is
that you want to
often,
either that you know you're gonna
when
have
you
to give a
want to
talk or
reach
you're gonna have to
everyone,
write a
you
story,
actually end up
or if you just
reaching
want
no
to
one,
imagine one
because
that
there
would
are
fit
so
to
many
you,
different
you can
groups.
type
So
in
you can think of
the
like school
workbook
students,
in the
family,
workbook
clients,
the why, like what's the
policymakers,
reason today for you to
biophysicists,
share
seaweed
and communicate your
enthusiasts. I mean,
science
this is
today.
endless.
This is also
And
a great
you're
moment
gonna
where
adapt, you're gonna
every
see,
burning
even
questions or
sometimes
comments
very in a
are
subtle way, your content, your
welcomed.
language, and your style. So trying to know your audience the best that you can is often helpful. For instance, asking yourself how particular they may be, how different they may be compared to others. What do they care about? If you have any insights on their interests, their goals, passions, then you can establish a bridge between your science and their domains. You may also want to know what do they know already. And for that, the best way is always to ask the event organizer, or you speak to the producer of the interview you're gonna have, or you're gonna talk to the teacher of the class you're gonna go to, asking, for instance, for the curriculum of the students, or reviewing the podcast history of the podcast interview you're gonna give, to kind of like get a sense of who are those different groups that may compose your audience. And last but not least, it's always good to put to go in someone else's shoes, to like really try to see what do they find contradictory, controversial, adapted to certain cultures. Right now, of course, we are talking a lot of like German and US culture. Like your way of telling a story may be slightly different compared, I mean, based on who you're gonna have in your audience. So let's say if you are going to a general conference of 21st century Anthropocene challenges, you got invited there. This is open to the general public. You, as some of the audience do, I believe you work at the German Institute of Human Nutrition, and you are part of a panel that is on the 21st century nutrition. So you know that in the audience, there's going to be a broad interest, not specialized, perhaps people not really knowing. So you're going to have to bring people background information to take them where they are at in order to get them where you want them to go. And on the contrary, if you have like someone in the attendance, I believe, work at the German Nautical Cartography, and let's say you are invited on a conference on scientific cartography with experts only in cartography. You give a keynote speech there. You know that you can skip some basic information because your public is already quite informed. And you can again take the audience where they are at and perhaps go more into details. So again, if you have in mind one event, feel free to use the workbook and try to write down. I put a couple of boxes there because often this is not like just one main bracket. You may know a couple of different audiences from like, I don't know, NGOs, but also some academics. So feel free to use it based on the information that you may have gathered of a specific event you have in mind. And again, this is a good moment for burning questions, burning comments.
I may have one question. I see you put like 5 boxes, which seems maybe a little bit a lot to me. Is there a maximum of targets, let's say, or general audiences we can identify, or is it better to focus on maybe 1 or 2 of them? What are your specific recommendations on this point?
Yeah, thanks for your question, Damien. Definitely this is very free format in the sense that sometimes if you know that your audience may be quite large, it's helpful to kind of like almost, you know, paint different personas of those. At the same time, you may have already quite of a precise idea, or your information are limited, then you just use one, or you use two if you feel that there are two, you know, slightly different profiles between, let's say, policymakers and interest groups. So this is very, yeah, very open. Sometimes you will only have one in the end.
Thank you.
All right, and the last W, again, feel free to keep on writing whenever you want. I'm gonna go quickly through that. This is the what, which is the format. And for me, it really sounds like you choose the right shoes for the right purpose. So you don't go with high heels on a mountain trekking, the same way that you won't read your paper, your scientific paper, to a TV interview. So the what's going to be the format of your story will adapt the style, the angle, the content. I put in the workbook multiple ones, so either written, like blog post, newspaper article, interview, etc. Book, some with video, TV interview, online video, etc. And also others, which are more of a conversations, talk, roundtables, etc. So feel free to tick potentially the one that you have in mind. And the reason of having already this mindset, if I would give an example, like if you participate to a round table where you know you're going to have other panelists around you, like you're going to focus on core ideas clearly exposed. You won't need a form because you know that the moderator will ask you questions. You're going to need to be reactive, providing example, key facts, and like packing content in a short amount of time. While, for instance, if like last year, I had 12 minutes given by the Future Forum Building Biopolis on video. So I knew that my message could be impactful, but at the same time, I kind of had some time to go into depth in some details I wanted to share. I needed definitely clarity because I had no background, no feedback of the audience, and I could also help visuals. So you can write some characteristics of the format that you have in mind so that it's going to definitely inform the way that you will be approaching your presentation, your story. So now is a moment where we're going to have it fairly quick, but I would love to have a sharing round already, perhaps already a few insights, either from some who have in their mind something that they are already preparing, or how do these three elements resonate? Is it something that you had already experienced? I would welcome 2 to 3 inputs from you guys. Feel free to unmute yourself and start if I don't see you raising a hand.
Want us to, what exactly do you want to tell, like how we answered the questions, or can you just repeat in terms of inputs?
I would say more your perhaps either past experience that you may have had if you already prepared at some point a presentation or a story, or indeed if you already have some insights on how you managed to go through these different questions and reply to them. Feel free to share. This is quite open. I just would love a way for all of us to connect in some capacity. So I would say go ahead, Joanne, feel free to share with us where you stand.
Joanne, you're muted, I think.
Oh, oops. Okay. So I already give a lot of talks on building your global career, and people have felt really inspired. So now I've been inspired to write a book. And so why do I want to do this? Because I feel like I want to enhance the quality of life of others and help them understand that they have more than one career within themselves. Because a lot of people are like postdocs or graduates, like, oh my God, if I don't make it here. And so I really want to inspire people to, go outside of themselves. And so my target is, college students, PhDs, postdoc, and also mid-career professionals that are kind of like unsure about if this is the right direction for them, and maybe they want to think about their career. So my format is a book. And I don't want to know if you want my whole story, but I have a story also that I'm starting my book with. But I don't know if you want me to go that far. So
Maybe later. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Joanne. Very exciting to hear that.
I do see that we have one hand raised, so that makes me
Yes.
think maybe Sarah wants to share.
Yes, please go ahead and mute yourself. It's free flowing.
Thank you. First, I wanted to ask a question. And first, Joanne, thank you very much. I think you are my woman. We have to communicate later. But the first question is that not the first question that I didn't understand quite the levels we are talking about at the moment, because at the very beginning you presented yourself and gave us a story. And there are two levels of stories. There is a personal story about a person, about myself, and another story about my work. And of course, it's not separable completely, but sometimes, and depends on the audience, these are two different stories. And it's not always easy to combine and to say a few things. And I just wanted to understand, is it something you would like us to combine? Or is it something you would like to hear about one thing or another thing? Because I'm a scientist. I also gave a lot of presentations, and it's from time to time very, very exciting, because I find my topics very exciting, and I think I can convey the emotion which is connected with what I'm working at. But the point is, if I have, as you have said, a very diverse audience, and I have politicians and people from different religious communities and people from international organizations, and they, from time to time, don't even like each other. It is difficult to have one story, and it's difficult. And the only possibility that I experience is just to say, well, I'm talking about what I think it's right for me, and then if they don't agree, it's okay. But this storytelling. I don't think it's really storytelling. And again, to come back to that personal story, that if I and I'm based in Germany, if I would combine my personal story with my scientific one, I might compromise my scientific position, because if I'm writing poetry and I say that the inspiration is coming from somewhere else, and I'm working with, I don't know what kind of digital humanities data, it doesn't fit. For most of it, it fits for me, definitely. That's not a point. But the problem is for how to transport different. And is it relevant? Is it necessary? Is it bringing value inside? And this is for myself personally. Of course, there is the big value inside, but I just don't know how to put it together and how to work with that, and if it's possible to work with that. But this is a huge box I open, and I hope it's not too much. Thank you.
Thank you, Zrinka. Yes, very exciting, and actually perfect transition to our next part. So you made it very good. Indeed, I mean, there is a lot. It's a broad question, and there is that would take us definitely a day if we would go through the refinement of it. When it comes to personal story versus professional story, indeed, it really depends again on what is the event, and we're gonna see later on a little bit more. Sometimes there will be moments where you can share your personal insights, and sometimes there is no room for that, as you mentioned. And it's all case by case. Of course, you can also decide to be quite, I would say, avant-gardist, and also try to combine it all, while at the same time not necessarily jeopardizing your career or your commitments. But indeed, this is personal. Or like this is an assessment to do at the beginning in terms of personal story versus science, or like versus your work story. We're gonna right now go ahead and start with the main dish, And which is indeed, there are so many stories that you can tell. There are some that are more related to you, to your path, and then there are some that are more related only to the topic of your research. And right now you can choose any that you want. Of course, the strategies will be different, but I will be sharing with you, and that's why we needed to zoom a little bit out so that we can include everyone on that topic. And so what you can do is think of a few way to share, or a few stories or a few events of your life, perhaps either the core of your research or your business, your institution. So for now, as has been mentioned, feel free to go ahead and think of a few aspects of your life or your work. It really depends what's one story that you would like to share, depending on the format, depending on the event or the opportunity that you have. So you can use the workbook and write about it. You can also post in the chat the topic so that we can inspire each other if you already have in mind a specific story that you would like to write. For instance, if I would give you an example, a couple of years ago, every year for the World Architecture Festival, the agency that I co-founded, we were putting together a panel discussion, and we were also producing some video content. And every year of the World Architecture Festival had a specific theme. And a couple of years ago, the theme was performance. And this is where often stories are not obvious, because when you look at what you do in your work, and right now I'm mostly talking about the science, or more, I would say, the work angle, the stories may not be necessarily very obvious. And when we got that theme of performance in architecture, it was quite hard to understand how we would engage architects and engineers to produce a panel discussion. And in the end, the way that I tackled it was to reflect on what is one specific angle where performance is highly necessary in architecture. And I was thinking acoustics and architecture. And more precisely, I then went on to choose the topic of concert halls architecture, while by running interviews with the creators of concert halls, so they are mostly, it's like a trio. It's always an architect, an acoustician, and a music conductor. So I run interviews with them, and I made them speak of what is it, performance, in a space where acoustics needs to be perfect in the field of this specific typology of building. So often the stories are not very obvious. It's like you look at your past years, your past work, and you don't necessarily see so clearly in depth what can be the story. So think right now for a few minutes. I'm gonna also welcome any burning questions if needed, or you go ahead and you post it in the chat. Any of those aspects that you may want to expand in stories. Everyone feel free on continuing to write, but I see a great comment from Sarah Eckert, who writes about science that may be cool and science that may not sound cool. Sarah, do you mind sharing what's your science topic that you are working with?
Sure, I have my video off just because of connection issues here. So my job, I'm a communicator, and a lot of what I do is for Arctic and Antarctic research, and there's a lot of really cool work that goes on at both poles, and most people just focus on polar bears or penguins, and so one of my jobs is to bring to life some of the less charismatic, I should say, less charismatic animals in a way that shows how the research, into krill, for example, is a valuable part of understanding the ecosystems in these communities and changing environments. And so I spend time looking at different photos, trying not to be lean heavily towards something that is maybe just a cool photo of an animal that people want to see, but also really being thoughtful about talking about and giving respect to scientists who are who are wanting to learn more about the work going on. Sorry, I just read the comment, and yes, worms and penguins.
Yes, I think it's a great, it's definitely a great comment, because this is where often we think, and especially scientists and innovators will think it this way. The story that I have to share is not necessarily interesting. It's not even a story. Like, what are we talking about? And on that, actually, which comes with the next element that I wanted to tell you, it's like, when we come again to like the purpose of storytelling, like what are we talking about? Like when it's that, like, storytelling for me is when you talk or when you write, when you talk, people listen to you. They listen to you from the beginning to the end. Meaning you manage to address to them one topic that they are not getting easily distracted. They constantly come back to that because you trigger something with them. You trigger an attention that they want to keep on exploring with you. So for me, in like knowing, okay, then how do we do that? I think it's always coming like back to the base of talking and writing as a human to a human. So there are a couple of things that, and I'm presenting two that I always balance when I prepare my talks, which is like on one hand, curiosity, emulating curiosity, and on the other hand, sharing emotions. And curiosity, it's basically a way to craft or to package some of your research insight, some of your science insight into something that people may not have known before. So you bridge an information gap, or you have an anecdote, something that like people can really relate to. So for instance, like you give a talk on like ocean acidification, and you want to address the fact that plastic pollution is part of the problem. So what you could say, and like often we talk about the hook, which I'm not a huge fan of this terminology, but this is kind of like a way of emulating curiosity. Like you could say every minute, one garbage truck of plastic is dumped into the oceans. That's one way for someone to understand what's the consequence or what's the amplitude of the issue we are talking about. Or let's say your science is on thermal expansion. You may just say the Eiffel Tower can be 15 centimeters taller during the summer. That allows a certain information gap where from this point you can expand. Or we all know, for instance, the story of the young Isaac Newton, who was like sitting beneath an apple, contemplating, the mysterious universe, and then like there is an apple falling, actually in front of him. The legend says on his head, but his biographies got the insight from him that it just like fell in front of him. And anyway, in a flash, he really understood that the same very force that brought the apple crashing towards the ground also kept the moon falling towards the earth and the earth falling towards the sun, which was gravity. So you know what I mean? Sometimes this is the most complicated and strenuous aspect of science. If you bring them to something easier to understand, you are getting your audience hooked, in the sense you are getting the curiosity attuned. So feel free to jot down in the workbook while we speak some of these aspects of your research where you are thinking, that could be one aspect that I could further work on to try to present and package to a way that would fit. Again, the level of descriptions will come back to your audience, like knowing how general their knowledge is or how very precise their knowledge is will inform you on the level of explanation that you would say. So go ahead, and I'm also welcoming any burning questions or comments.
I have a question. It's Andre speaking. Could you speak a little bit about the use of visuals? Like I'm an engineer, I like a lot to use visuals to explain and diagrams to explain concepts that might be very complex to the audience. So could you expand a little bit on how to use visuals in this line of the storytelling? Yeah, I think it would be cool to know.
Yes, thanks, Andre, for your questions. Definitely, visuals can be a great facilitator of what you are saying and translating your information. I think, I mean, based on dozens of science conferences I participated to, very often visuals are rather overwhelming the viewers, the listeners with details and not necessarily engaging. So it's often I tend to prefer to put less in the visuals. Perhaps I love, for instance, just using pictures, not necessarily using facts, and then bringing the facts, the numbers through your presentation. So it's always, yeah, finding the good balance of how much your audience need to know. By experience, if you pack your slides with multiple informations like the traditional PowerPoint with like bullet point and facts and graphs, it's very easy to lose attention of your audience. So for me, I would always say the less the better, and rather have someone or welcoming someone to come to you after your presentation and asking for more details or for more source. I know in engineering it can be very good to provide with a lot of scientific details. I would not necessarily have it for every presentation orally. Rather engaging through visuals that will translate what you are saying, and not too much overwhelmed with numbers, facts, graph. All right, and together with this like curiosity, kind of like looking at your story and being like, how can I emulate curiosity through, either like an information gap you are bridging or a story that like everyone can relate to. Another aspect that I wanted to bring is the emotions, which I think, I mean, for everyone who is very attuned with storytelling, this is nothing new, but for a lot this is not really known. And it's basically to kind of like bring the characteristics of like mental and energetic states of you or your team, of whoever is involved in your story, and to highlight it, to basically spread the vibe. So for that, in the workbook I put an emotion wheels, which I was actually very happy to find, because for years I found that the lack of vocabulary of how we feel, it's actually scientifically proved that it leads to more conflicts worldwide, but that's another story. But so the more we have vocabulary to express how we feel, actually the easier it is to reflect on a whole story, but also on a whole sharing experience and sharing to the general public science information. So you can look at this wheel and see from like the 6 main emotions: joy, love, fear, anger, sadness, surprise, which ones, and like pin like the subtlety of some of the emotions, and kind of start having them into your mind to like weave into your story. And on that, I see we are already 1 hour into our workshop. So without further ado, I would make a very small break where you can reflect on your emotions of today or the week, looking at this wheel and perhaps like thinking. You can also go grab coffee, go run to the bathroom. The break's gonna be short, it's gonna be 3 minutes. So we are back in 3 minutes. So first of all, I wanted to say I'm extremely delighted to see all of the engagement in the chat. Of course, I can't follow it much, but I was just looking at all of what you guys share, and this is wonderful. This is exactly what we wanted with the DVIHA team, is that, you know, knowledge flows. And the same that anything that I share with you, this is just my own experience and insights. And by no means anything exhaustive. So this is great to see how much we can reach when we put together common knowledge. So now we are, one thing that can be useful sometimes when we are doing science stories is to work with a framework. So I enclosed one that you find on, I believe, page 5, and you take it or not. I mean, of course, experienced speakers probably won't need it, but when you are quite new to the topic, this can be very useful. So basically, if you look, it's all about like looking at your story. And when we say the story, what's great is like often you think like, what is the impact of my work? Like, what is the one thing or the two things that I really want to show regarding my work? And when you have that in mind from the previous questions and exercises we did, then you can try to place it into this framework. And of course, at first you may have just the beginning and the end, but not really the in-between. So it can take a little practice to come to that. But one kind of like nice flow of stories. You have one which is like about a villain and a hero, which I'm not necessarily a huge fan of this one because it tends to be quite black and white. So I enclose here one that I find quite interesting, and it's like you start with like a character in like ordinary world. So that character can be you, it can be your team, but it can also be your science topic. Like you can also make it playful and actually bring at the center not like a physical person, but bring like the, you know, the worms, for instance, or the penguins, or anything else, something even much more scientific. And basically then you can look into like the I would say, if we look at the end of the story, this is like the life after, like the integrated learning, like what you want to share, the impact, the implication of your work. And in between, what will happen, or what is great to try to find out, is when did the calling happen? And the calling, often we, you know, in movies we see it as like something big, like an adventure of like a new situation or like a change. But often in real life, I mean, if you are, you know, like normal people, it may be something very tiny. It may be an email you received. Maybe someone knocking on your door and asking you a question or bringing you a piece of information. It may have been a very slight change that made you from being into one situation to then you having a different science angle or research or results that will then be the beginning of change. And so after that, there will be always some roadblocks and what I call resolution, which is basically always, life is never, you know, a steady curve. So this is trying to look and reflect on your past work, your past years, and seeing where have been the moments of roadblocks where you may have had hesitation, refusal, but also like, let's say, struggle in your science, where things did not go through in an easy way, and the moment that you managed to, you know, to go through that, which may be through like someone else coming, or more, you know, more research or more funding or anything. So you can play with the structure, and also each of those moments, then you can also play by adding some of the emotions that you may have felt during the way, where you will soon start seeing a rough structure of your story, that with different moments of your work and of your life together with different emotions. So go ahead and feel free to use the little form. And for the ones who wants to hear an example, for instance, like I come back to the Building Biopolis event that I was invited to last year from the DVIH team. And I had the chance to give a keynote speech on the infrastructure part of Building Biopolis and the future of the green city. And what I wanted to communicate as my vision of the green city was that it had to be a city that repairs the natural ecosystems. But it can sound quite flat. I mean, often we hear about natural ecosystems or urban planning, but these are big words. So what did I do? I basically explained what happened to me that made me come to the point of seeing it as the only vision of the city that fits to our global challenges. So I actually talked about what I saw by working in architecture, in construction. I talked about the pollutions, the madness of city making, the waste of construction materials. I gave numbers, but I also explained my despair, my doubts, my frustrations. And then I also talked about the light, like what inspired me to believe that regenerative design was our future. And then based on that, I could be quite technical at explaining the pillars of regenerations that are often very scientific. But I was also conveying the reasoning and the feeling, the moments that made me endorsing those principles. Because sometimes, no matter how scientific it can be, like everything comes with like a moment, a feeling. So you can share, you can write, or you can reflect on your own personal story. For now, we have a bit more time for that, as it's quite long. We have, I would say, 5 minutes. And meanwhile, if someone has burning question or comments, go ahead and unmute yourself. All right, and while you may still be writing some insight, I wanted to come back to one comment that was into the chat earlier, which was around this sometimes difficulty of addressing science story to general public, but also knowing that your colleagues gonna read it, or your colleagues may be in the room attending. And indeed, this is not easy, and at the same time, it's that's gonna come in the last part that I'm gonna talk about. But it's a lot about practicing and gathering experiences, because ultimately you will never be able to please everyone. That's why what's key is to come back to who your audience is. If your audience is of a general public and you decide to approach the topic fairly general to make it available to everyone, your decision of how you tackle it is your decision. Other scientists may have a very different road, but every topic, every science has 1,000 roads that can be used as stories to be shared. So if some of your colleagues may go with another approach, this is completely possible. But ultimately, you won't be able to, it's going to be hard to often get the approval of everyone. Of course, if then the video has for our audience both targets, then it's either you come quite low in terms of the level of the degree of details that you share to the people watching the video, so that everyone understands, and of course then it can be redundant and repetitive for your colleagues, or you make it quite high level so that it matches your colleagues' understanding, but then you may lose some of your audience. So ultimately you can go for both. Often I would say do not bother too much if your colleagues are just watching, because they are just getting informed on everything, which is great. You're gonna get feedback, you're gonna get critiques, but this is how you grow. This is by then being able to incorporate those feedback and critiques. If you had a more precise question on that, I love the topic, feel free to post it there. And otherwise, I will share with you a couple of things that are regarding I would say once you have this like rough structure, of course haters are gonna hate anyway. Yes, that's exactly that. And often feedback is welcome. This is what you're gonna need to be a better storyteller of your science. You're gonna need sometimes presentations where you feel you did not do a great job, and based on that you're gonna be able to improve. If you don't do anything, then of course this is harder. And being nervous, that's something that I'm gonna talk about in the last part, but being nervous is completely normal. You always have people in the attendance who probably know more than you, and that doesn't make it easy. But nerves are actually often serving you the good way. So coming back to your story, once you have like the rough structure, and you may have it already right now, perhaps in your mind, not necessarily written, what is good for me is to always rework the story by what I call polishing, because there are a couple of things that always happens, a couple of tendencies. Like the first one is what I call the curse of knowledge, is that you may feel obvious some aspects that's going to be very hard for your audience to understand. So that's the moment where you need to find the good balance between making sure people get some insights that you may believe they know but they don't, and at the same time, if you try to explain everything, you're gonna explain nothing. So you need to be realistic of not converting a non-specialist into an expert, and at the same time being focused, like often the fewer the better. So you can write down, for instance, in the workbook, some of the aspects where you could potentially know that a non-specialist, if this is your target audience, may not understand, and then work from that. Another aspect may be what I call the assembly of ideas. This is because, again, as stories may not be obvious at first, you may have a couple of elements in your mind on how the evolution of your work happened. But ultimately, this is by coming back to a logic of building before planning, that you're gonna get your attendance, you're gonna get your audience towards the point that you want them. And this is where often one thing that is a little bit feared in storytelling is that taking apart the topic of your research will dumb it down. And of course, you should worry about oversimplification, especially if you oversimplify the complexity to the point of inaccuracy. But it can also be translating, this is like finding the common ground. And if you build the explanation carefully, you can actually guide your audience without oversimplification. That requires practice, that requires a bunch of writing. And one aspect or one heads up that helps to me is to look again into my story and look at the jargon, like the key terms that sometimes scientists or innovators may think this is great to drop them into a conversation. People's gonna be impressed, so kind of like a credibility matter. But actually often, like specific difficult topic that your audience may know won't impress your audience. They may actually respect you less because they will be lost. So again, coming back on like knowing your audience will make you decide the level of vocabulary that you're gonna be talking, that you're gonna be using to explain your story. And one thing that I personally really like to do is really to paint pictures with your words. So using creative language, like comparators, metaphors. So for instance, I have a couple of examples there. Like if you, let's say you are a specialist in circadian rhythm biology. So circadian rhythm are physical, mental, behavioral changes that follow a 24-hour cycle. These natural processes respond primarily to light and dark and affect most living things, including animals, plants, and microbes. And chronobiology is the study of circadian rhythms. You may present it this way if you have a technical audience that doesn't mind the dry language. Or if you want to make it much more relatable to potentially an audience that doesn't really understand that topic, you may say something like, little flying animals can tell the time of the day. Little flying animals can tell the time of the year. It's all in their heads. This is basically circadian rhythm biology. Or let's say if you want to talk about the compositions of the atom in the human being, like you can go into the details of the atoms making up, the world that seems to be solid, but in fact there is a lot of empty space, and this is exactly what happens in the human body. And one way to paint pictures with words would be, for instance, to say, if you took out all the empty space in our atoms, the human race could fit in the volume of a sugar cube. This is what I mean with painting pictures with words. It's trying to use metaphors, trying to use creative language so that again you get your audience where they are at and you bring them to level of understanding that you want in terms of explaining the impact of your work, of your research. So feel free to think of a few of those elements, the curse of knowledge, the jargon, but also painting pictures with work and your logic right now for a couple of minutes. And after that, if the technical setup allows it, we're gonna have quick breakout rooms of 3 minutes each, which is gonna be 2 and 2, where you could tell your story draft, but more in a way, don't get afraid, more in a way of like getting help, asking for advice to someone. You may just like pitch very quickly what's one of the story that you have in mind of writing about, and then like asking like, did you get lost? Did you get me? What do you think of that? But for now, think of these different elements of polishing your story, and in 3 minutes we're gonna be doing the breakout rooms. Thank you guys.
Welcome back. I hope you guys all managed to deal with the tech, and if one of you was stuck alone for a few minutes, I apologize. We had some people leaving, so I hope you guys all managed to connect with someone.
Yes, welcome back everyone. Hope you managed to go out of your comfort zone and share some of these insights. I know this is always kind of like, gonna get by myself with someone I don't know, but hey, you know, practicing and uplifting each other comes with sharing, no matter how experienced or beginners we are. One thing I wanted to reflect on before, and that's gonna open kind of a 5 minutes sharing round where I would love to hear from you, perhaps some of the insights that you had of like listening to someone, and yeah, if you want to share how it was for you. I wanted to come back to something that has been said in the chat, which I found, yeah, that's going to be always key, which is like exhaustivity of the elements that you are sharing. It's often when we think of like storytelling, it's like, it seems like to be like a fairy tale and all of that, but ultimately this is coming back to the implication of your work, or like, where is your work helpful? And someone named Eve Blomsma. So I had like this question of like, what is useful for like my audience to know? And that doesn't mean you're gonna have to tell everything, and there is no one format for exhaustivity from where you write everything or you express everything, apart from perhaps in your, you know, PhD your PhD memoir or a specific technical paper. So when we talk about like a public speaking engagement or an interview that you give, you're gonna need to make choices, and these choices means not telling about everything, but at the same time bridging into these different pieces of information so that someone gets the overall meaning of what you mean. But now the floor is for you for a few minutes. So I would love to hear perhaps, 2 to 3 experiences, feedback on how these sharing moments have been.
Well, for me, it was great because I had these two, Max and Laura, listening to me for 3 minutes because they were not scientists. So for me, it was great to have them listening my mini story, because it's a short time to do it. But yeah, they could also make some comments, positive comments. So it was great. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Laura, for sharing. Anyone else want to share, perhaps even like already mentioning what's the story that you were having in mind to share, and what have been some of the feedback you got? Yes, just go ahead, unmute yourself and go ahead.
Yeah. I would like to share one good feedback that I received. That was how differently some words can be related on. So, for example, you can talk a lot of sentences and say a lot of scientific and technical stuff, but there are some words, in my case it was the word robots, that everyone can relate to. And I think it's very important to highlight those words because then you can catch the audience. And that was a good feedback, yeah.
Nice, wonderful. Yes, indeed. Sometimes the what's gonna bridge you between your audience and where you are at lies in the simplicity of a couple of words that will then enable you to build upon further complexity. One last story, one last feedback. Don't be shy. We have 20 minutes left together. We're now all knowing each other.
I guess I can tell what Gabriele told me. She told me her story of how, through coincidence and curiosity, she ended up in the position that she's now, and she found a very exciting protein that might be useful for cancer research. And the first thing that I thought when she told me her story was I wasn't sure what she will use it for, like which audience, but the first moment that I thought about was that this is perfect for if you tell this to young, like high school children. This is what you want to hear. What does a scientist do? They find like cool new things and change lives for people. So yeah, it was nice to hear. And then the framework was helping me to think of like, yeah, which audience would fit for this.
Nice, great. Thanks for sharing, Annika. And yeah, and you will be surprised also how many people, even in like fairly technical conferences, would welcome so much an anecdote about yourself or an anecdote about your work. You know, we are constantly overwhelmed with the technical information, especially if we work in a technical field. And sometimes having those little pearls of just, you know, being yourself and relating to your own parkour makes a lot. So that can be very useful. Feel free to keep on sharing in the chat. Meanwhile, we're gonna move towards the last part of our workshop, which is obviously the dessert. Hope you can hear me. You let me know. I see some of the cameras kind of like spinning wheel. So for that last part, I mean, everything is very personal. So I was contemplating what have been some of the best tips I either received or I experienced when giving a talk. I rather speak about the talk formats because this workshop is, as Jared explained, into the framework of the Science Story Exchange launched by the DVIH. At the same time, some are the same. Some can be also very good tips when you write an interview for a newspaper or even any other format. So some of the main tips that I got that have been over the past years helping me a lot. The first one has been definitely practice. Like practice, practice, practice. Like rehearse it out loud, record it, play it back, rehearse it in front of your family, your friends, like whatever is helpful. I've been rehearse it like just by yourself, but being able to practice a talk will make a huge difference from what you want to say in the way that you're gonna say it. Also, if you're at the fairly beginning of like, you know, just like doing a few talks here and there, this is very helpful to understand the language aspect that you may want to tweak. Also understanding, which is another of my kind of like tips or things to think of, which is about the flow of your presentation. Sometimes if you listen to yourself, you may realize that some more pauses or a different pace would serve better your purpose. Not always easy. I'm the first one to speak very fast and not leaving a lot of silence, but you can play with that. You can also play to go slow and see how it feels. See how it feels to someone who train with you. Another of the tips I wanted to share with you is this aspect of like bringing what like burns within you to shine out. So that has two things. It's on one hand, being yourself, like really looking at like what burns within and how can you spread it? How can you uplift each other by sharing it? So which is the shine out. That means like how to be contagious. Those aspects often come in the way that you're gonna talk and relate to everyone. It's also a way on how you connect with each other or how you connect to your audience, which is another of my tips, which was the connection over content. Sometimes, again, we want to say so much and explain everything that comes at the price of telling a lot of details, but not connecting with your audience. And there will be always things that you wanted to say, but you did not say. That's the case for me today. There have been so many more things I wanted to share with you, but ultimately there is a choice to do, especially if you want to connect with your audience. So for me, that aspect, even if there is no Q&A, even if this is not like a moderation type of format, the connection and notably being able to look at your audience is always a big difference. Another tip, which is not easy. It took me years, and even today, it's often really not easy. I used to be, until my university, end of my university years, extremely panicked at any public speaking engagement. I was getting red, I was shaky, I could not read my notes, but of course I could not be without my notes because my brain was just blank. And one thing that I learned, which was very, very hard, but so good, is to break away from your notes reading. Because, and if you, for instance, you just like bullet point your story, and then it comes with a practice, if you practice, you're gonna get an overall sense, but you will also not freak out if you forget things. And that allows you one thing, which was my next tip, which is to really root your presence, because often you are nervous. I mean, everyone is nervous, but also everyone in your audience expects you to be nervous. And nerves are not a disaster. This is the difference of you being in your comfort zone, and then suddenly you are out of your comfort zone. You are in the growth area. You're not in the panic area, hopefully. That's why you work, you practice, but you're in the growth area. So of course your nerves are very high, and of course you're gonna feel like your heart's beating, which is the case for me every single time that I give a speech. But if you work on that, if you work on rooting your presence, this nerves, this excitement, this stress, the positive stress will actually help you. And for me, some of the things that really helped me in terms of the concrete way to do is, for instance, to really speak from the belly, not to speak from your throat, because often we speak to here, and especially if we are in front of an audience, we want to make sure everyone hear from far, but you're actually stressing your whole area here. So if you speak from the belly, and also if you practice deep, long breathing, you're gonna come back to reset of your parasympathetic system. You're gonna leave the mode of like fight and flight. And sure, you're gonna still be in this growth area outside of your comfort zone, but you're gonna be as relaxed as you can, as relaxed as your body and your brain needs to convey your story, to be able that even if you forget one thing, or even if someone drops a question that wasn't intended, like you can still get your thread back. Which comes with, I believe my last tip with that, which is like about working the space that you have, whatever space that is. Like even if you are digitally here, it makes a hell of a difference if you are actually, you know, having like a posture that, because you're stressed and everyone is stressed, and yeah, just feeling very uncomfortable in the way that you have to share your story. So for me, a couple of things that helped me, which came a lot with my Kundalini practice, notably, is actually to have a straight spine, shoulders relaxed, navel point slightly engaged, your torso is open, and then you can relax all of your other muscles, like your feet are on the ground, and from them you can really walk the space. If you're someone using your hands, use your hands. I'm not a big fan of talking about body language because I feel often it's like you need to learn a different language, you know, in order to give a talk. Actually, for me, this is not about learning a language. It's actually about coming back to how you feel when your body serves you. And for me, how do I feel? It's when my body serves me, is when everything that doesn't need to be tense is not tense. And my straight spine allows me to stay very rooted together with the feet. And that, if you are standing in front of an audience, if you are in front of a laptop, has been tremendously helpful for me. And then you're fine with whatever happens. You're fine with like being nervous that, you know, your colleagues or anyone else can listen or can disagree. There will be always people disagreeing anyway. There will be always people not content by what you share, which is fine, as Of course, as long as this is not the majority of your audience, at the same time, it may happen. But this is a learning, and you know that from this learning, you will just move on to something else. So I would welcome a time for sharing round now. If you want to tell your story, or if you want to reflect on these tips, if you have further tips on how to give good talk presentation or any questions, we have a good 5 minutes for that.
Hi, I'm Fazi. I have this one engagement where we did a panel discussion, which actually was for the DVIH, and I was supposed to moderate it. I did moderate it, and we had talked about some questions beforehand. I would ask the experts in the panel discussion, but funnily, one of the experts already answered all the questions I had on my sheet in his talk. So I actually had to come up with new ones on the go. And I think it worked out well. But at that moment, it was just like, okay, what would I ask? What would I want to know if I was somebody in that, audience? And how can I connect to that somehow and come up with questions? What interests me? What do I want to know from you? And what maybe the audience would want to know? So that worked out quite well, I think. And there I realized, okay, I have, I thought about this so much that I didn't need the notes in the end. I had turned this over in my head like a million times, and then the notes were not important anymore. I didn't practice, but somehow I realized I had practiced this in my head because I had visualized this whole situation so many times, and then somehow it worked out. So it was, yeah.
Great, thanks for sharing, Fatsi. Definitely adaptation to unexpected situation is a skill and an art to develop over the course of any experience in public speaking engagement. And definitely panel discussions may be tricky because you do not control at all the output of the people that you are having and who may indeed be sharing beforehand, before the panel discussion. So being able to always have a sort of a plan B may be useful, in this format, but also sometimes in other formats. You may want to think, okay, what could happen differently that may be worth being prepared for?
I can add something. So you actually did it at the beginning of this, is with a poll, is really engaging your audience early on. One, you learn about your audience, but they also feel like they're part of the, of the event. And I mean, when I give talks on design thinking or designing your life or whatever, I do it like I have people chat in something what's related to what I'm about to talk about, and that helps. And then I ask them, why do you think we did this exercise? So that they're already bringing themselves into the talk that you're giving. So like, oh yeah, and even those who didn't participate, then they kind of see the connection and they're already engaged in a deeper level.
Nice, thanks for sharing,
Joanne. An experience from my last moderation I had, which was quite difficult because, and this is the reason why I'm here, because in the last 20 years, I was always giving presentation or having moderations with people around me, not online. And that was the first workshop online. And I was very, very nervous because it was something like level of federal ministry, etc. And it was a great topic and everything was very, very exciting. But there were no people around me and I was sitting. I had no possibility to breathe as I was normally breathe. I was no possibility to feel myself comfortable in my body like I usually do. Although I'm nervous, but you always find a way how to be comfortable in that kind of nervous situation. And this is something I still have no. I mean, it's quite new experience, but how to deal with these situations online, because there is absolutely no emotion, there is absolutely no atmosphere around you. There is nothing, and I'm here today because I know this is the future of my work. It started to be on, everything is online, and I just don't feel comfortable with that. I cannot I cannot be as enthusiastic as I'm usually when I work with people around me. So this is, and I hope that storytelling might help me in this direction. I don't know, but if you have some hints about it, that would be great, because working with people, it's it gives you energy. It's sitting here now in front of the Zoom, not Zoom, but in front of the computer. It's completely different. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Zrinka, and definitely very hard to pick up on some signals when it's in the online Zoom. I think Katrin wanted to, play something on that note.
Yeah, because I totally feel you. And of course, I think we all feel you a lot. And we're trying to use little helplings, so to speak, and to work with that. So one thing that I find, we do a lot of online, of course, events as well. One thing you also have to realize, people also let you into their space. So it's, sometimes they have a different background, or they're sitting in their living room, or they're sitting in their office. So I usually try to establish some sort of a closeness by actually thanking everybody for letting us into their own spaces. So that kind of creates a different closeness. We also tend to work a lot, and some people find that stupid. We like it quite a bit. We work with icons. If you go to the bottom of your screen, you have this little smiley thingy. And we encourage people to actually use those icons if they like something that the speaker said. I'm clapping here, or I'm celebrating here, for example. This way, at least you as the speaker get some feedback from the audience, whether they all use it or not, but some of them actually started using it quite a bit more and don't think it's that childish anymore. And the third thing I wanted to mention, what I like about this workshop as well, is if you don't only see the speaker, or the speaker only sees themselves. I like to have the grid view. I like to see all of the audience, because that feels a little bit more like everybody's around me. I never just put myself on the screen, or maybe sometimes the person that's speaking. And what I personally really don't like as an audience member is if I'm muted and I can only see the speaker and they turn on the event, and then there's a person giving a presentation and then they turn it off. And maybe I'm allowed to put something in the chat. So this is, these are all different little tools and techniques that we're trying to use to at least create some sort of a closeness through the virtual digital space.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Katrin. And indeed, I mean, as you say, Zrinka, this is a whole new world to discover on that, and being able to pick up signals on how the audience feel. It's so different when you are inside the room. Even if people are not talking, you pick up on the emotions, you pick up on the attention. And when you are in front of your laptop, absolutely not. So I think part of it is about also learning to let go of these feelings and sensors that you normally had, and especially if you are an experienced public speaker, you definitely developed it over the years, and to learn it into a different way, and using, as Katrin mentioned, some of these little tools that may work for you or may don't work, but some may actually help you getting this sense of how do everyone feel and what you want to share. We are coming to an end of this workshop, so this is the official wrap up. And I would like to thank everyone of you to have joined today. This online format, even if that may be the future, they are always very challenging and tiring for everyone. So thank you for your engagement. It was wonderful. There is so much more to say about science and stories, so feel free to keep the dialogue up. If you had someone from the audience that you wanted to have contact with, like get in touch with them. If you want me to like get in touch with me, I put my email in the workbook. Let's keep on uplifting each other. Of course, a good story doesn't make it all. You still have to do the work. So this is, making sure that one goes with the other. But if you do the work, and if you probably all of you in this room do, you'll have something to share. You have something that is meaningful enough to inform someone. And you can be the one communicating. You can be the one in chat for that. So thanks again. And I will pass it back to the DVIH team for the last minute salutation. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Solène, and thanks again to everyone who kind of logged in here and attended with us. It was great to see your faces, to have some active engagement in the chat, and it seems like plenty of people learned things. I saw people talking about software and infographics and specific speakers, so that was all amazing. This was a little bit of an experiment today, our first time trying a workshop on storytelling. So after this is over, probably tomorrow, I'll be sending you all an email asking for your feedback. We've put together a survey that might take 10 minutes where you can say, this worked really well and this other part didn't, and I still have this question, and hopefully we can help you. I'll also collect some of those amazing resources that you were sharing in the chat and put them back to everyone else. And this is also being recorded, so it will be available to view afterwards if there's a particular point you want to go back and check out. There are a few opportunities we have coming up soon. So we're doing a series also on data visualization, which would have been great for Andre, but I think he might have already logged out, so I'll let him know. But yeah, we have a lecture and a workshop on data visualization as well. So if you're thinking about communicating not just through words and stories, but through images, then we can offer some resources. And ultimately, this whole workshop is kicking off a series that we're going to be hosting called the Science Story Exchange. And we would love it if you all wanted to contribute your own stories to this event series. So I'll be sharing information about that in a way that you could sort of express your interest. Yeah, the last thought that I want to give here is maybe something a little more emotional that we can kind of end on a bang, hopefully. But you know, I said in the text that I wrote about the event that storytelling is the oldest human tradition. It defined cultures and histories and places, but it also starts so many of our own lives. Like we are kind of oriented in the world by the stories that our parents teach us, or fairy tales, or the movies we watch and the shows we consume. And this whole today, I hope, has been a moment for us to kind of learn how we can harness some of that energy and some of that magic to take our mundane experiences or our niche research and work and make the world a little bit more incredible and make people's experiences see the magic in the real world. So thanks for attending. You all can log yourselves out. We will stay here in the space for about another minute in case someone wants to stay and say something or ask a question. But otherwise, thank you so much for coming. Have a great afternoon and evening, and we will definitely be back in touch. Bye, everyone.